Support for this podcast is provided by the American Bar Association Tax Section. Are you looking to make valuable connections with government officials, academics, and tax professionals? ABA Tax Section membership provides you with opportunities year-round to engage and network in your area of practice. Members receive discounts on meetings, CLE, and publications, and membership also provides you with free, on-demand CLE and special members-only news and updates. Discover how membership can benefit you and join at ambar.org/taxnotes. That's ambar.org/taxnotes.
Welcome to Tax Notes Talk, a podcast from Tax Notes, the leading source of tax news, information, and analysis.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm David Stewart, Editor-in-Chief of Tax Notes Today International. This week, tax season 2022. This year, the U.S. individual income tax filing season begins January 24th, putting things back on a normal schedule after a delayed start in 2021. But that's about the only normal thing this year. This is the third filing season since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, which has already caused significant delays and backups at the IRS. Add in the new provisions from the American Rescue Plan Act, like the Advanced Child Tax Credit and unemployment benefits, and there's a lot that practitioners and taxpayers have to take into account this year. Here to talk more about this is Tax Notes contributing editor Marie Sapiri. Marie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I understand you talked with two practitioners about the 2022 filing season. Can you tell us about them?
I spoke with two practitioners with extensive experience in return preparation, both of whom founded their own firms. Beverly Winstead is a tax attorney in Maryland who provides legal counsel to individual taxpayers as well as corporations and nonprofits, as well as return preparation services through her firm, the Law Office of Beverly Winstead. She is also an adjunct professor at her alma mater, the University of Maryland School of Law, where she was the director of the Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic. Paul Miller is a CPA in New York, where he runs Miller & Company, LLP, an accounting firm with multiple offices in New York City and around the country, and over 25 employees. His firm offers tax, accounting, and consulting services for approximately 3,000 individuals and business clients.
So what sort of issues did you talk about?
We spoke about the particular challenges that taxpayers and practitioners are likely to experience in the upcoming filing season, from the processing delays at the IRS to the implementation of legislation passed last year.
All right, let's go to that interview.
Thank you, Beverly and Paul, for joining me today to discuss this year's tax filing season.
You're welcome. Appreciate you having us on.
Thank you.
First, let's talk about the impact of the IRS's backlog. The IRS has already sounded the alarm that this year's filing season may be more turbulent than in years past. That announcement came right as the taxpayer advocate wrote in her report to Congress that last year was the most challenging year that taxpayers and professionals have ever experienced. A large part of the reason for the likely challenges is that the IRS is starting the new filing season with a backlog of unprocessed returns from last year. What has been the impact of that backlog so far on taxpayers, and how do you recommend that taxpayers prepare for this filing season?
The impact that I'm seeing is that it's really been a lot of frustration amongst the practitioners, people that practice like myself and I, because we know we can't really help facilitate IRS processing the returns. Frustration from the taxpayers because they need their money, they need their refunds. And then also, as you can see, frustration from Taxpayer Advocate Service because there's nothing that they can do. Also, they have very little ability to help facilitate the IRS, with actually, moving these tax returns along. And I'm sure frustration from the IRS also because they want to move faster, but they just really don't have the resources to really do everything that they've been tasked to do.
I think part of a lot of the issue during tax season last year was very difficult for the constant delays and up to the very last minute, the government waiting for the delay, as in just the case with Hurricane Ida. They waited till the very last minute, which puts people under a lot of pressure and gives people the opportunity to delay. For example, there's an extension right now of the 2020 tax filing for people affected by Hurricane Ida up until February 15th. So you're already in the commencement of 2021's tax filing, and you still have an open door for 2020. The IRS announced, I believe, last week that there are 6 million returns backlogged, and they shut down the electronic filing system for maintenance, their annual maintenance on January 3rd, which is very unusual considering the fact that you extended the deadline for both estimated tax payments as well as any filings due on 10/15. So you have a lot of people who haven't filed. You have a tremendous backlog of 6 million returns, which is 5 million more than usual. And the IRS not really talking still much about either the IRS, the Treasury, or Social Security that got hacked last year. And there's been Senate meetings, but there's been no disclosure on it. So the IRS is holding a lot of people's refunds because they don't even know if the return that they're looking at is actually the return that was filed. I've had numerous clients had to refile. I've had numerous clients that have not gotten their refunds, and it's been a major, major problem. And as a preparer, I don't have many answers for clients other than when we call the tax practitioners hotline, they tell us that they're in process or they ask us for more information. It's going to be very interesting this year to see how these new PIN numbers work out with the filing of the return and if that'll cause further delay, because with the hacking of the government simultaneously issued an alert for everybody to get a PIN number. And now these PIN numbers come in the mail. And coming in the mail and having to coordinate with however many people you prepare their returns for is going to really further delay or cause more problems. So those are some of the highlights. I think it's going to be a challenging year. We've at my office have also braced for the fact that we could be, as could anybody, affected by COVID. And we've all prepared, and that I've given out tests to every one of my staff members so that they have tests, they have multiple tests in case they do end up having to bow out for a week or 10 days. Frightening times.
So turning to the question of customer service at the IRS versus enforcement, calling the IRS to get questions answered has been especially difficult for taxpayers recently. The Taxpayer Advocates report said that the IRS's customer service representatives answered 32 million calls of the 282 million that the agency received last year. In light of the customer service difficulties, the Taxpayer Advocate and other professional groups have recommended that the IRS needs to prioritize taxpayer service over compliance efforts. What would you like to see the IRS do to improve customer service?
I think I would like to see the agent on the phone be available to answer or available to resolve more of the problems on the phone. They should task the person or the agent that they put on the phone with the capabilities of resolving the issue at hand. And I think that a lot of times it's a call back. They can handle a few of the tasks. They can handle the majority of the tasks. It's also incredibly difficult today to get an auditor on the phone. So I think that if I was running the IRS, I would grant more abilities to the people answering the telephone.
That's actually a very good point, Paul. I think one of the things I learned, which I didn't know, I learned back in December when I went to the Civil and Criminal Tax Fraud Conference in Vegas, that IRS uses the same people who answers the phones to also process the returns. So if the returns are getting processed, no one's answering the phones. If they're answering the phones, the returns aren't getting processed, right? So now we're in a situation where we're about to go into another tax season. As Paul mentioned, IRS is 6 million, behind 6 million tax returns. Now is the time when taxpayers generally want two things. They want to be able to call IRS and have IRS answer the phone, as well as also get their returns processed, right? Which are two competing interests if the person who answers the phone is also processing the return. So I'm really concerned about this tax season also, because as I said before, it's a lot of frustration from from everybody. But when it comes to customer service, IRS they definitely need to answer the phone, you know, and as Paul says, you know, be able to resolve the issue. So I think everything starts with they're just understaffed. They really don't have the capacity to do what they're tasked to do. And I can only imagine by the end of this tax season, if you're talking about we're 6 million behind now, by the end of this tax season, I would venture to say we're probably going to be about 8 million behind. So it's time to just brace yourself.
Support for this podcast is provided by the University of California Irvine School of Law Graduate Tax Program. Ranked number 1 on the West Coast and number 5 nationwide, this innovative program prepares students to practice tax law at the highest level in the U.S. and abroad. Featuring a low student-to-faculty ratio, cutting-edge technology instruction, and dedicated career support, UCI's graduate tax program helps prepare students for a future in tax law. Program graduates are placed in top tax-related industries, practicing law in many major U.S. cities. Applications are open now. For more information and to apply to this highly selective program, visit law.uci.edu/gradtax. That's law.uci.edu/gradtax.
Continuing with the topic of prioritizing customer service, there have been multiple calls for the IRS to suspend all automated collection notices until the agency is current, or at least more current, on processing the original and amended returns and the unprocessed correspondence. There also seems to be some interest in Congress about pausing automated notices. How are the processing delays and the automated notices in particular affecting taxpayers, and what should we expect going into the new filing season?
I think anybody who gets an IRS notice is disturbed. I think the intent to levy is a very disturbing letter. I think I would like to see less of that. I think, again, it has to be a analysis of what they're doing. They immediately send out these letters when they may have the information, a person may have made a payment. Keep in mind that with the IRS being shut down, a lot of payments were being made manually. So when the payments are being made manually, we saw a lot of mailmen not delivering mail, backlog in mail. A lot of payments have been sitting there. I personally had a client who had a 2019 return, which was in a box delivered to the IRS, and it was just sitting there. And they're still sending out letters to him, even though they've received this return. It's not an easy answer. The system is broken and it's not easy to fix, but I think if they generally make strides to say, okay, this works, this doesn't work, and try to move more readily, like Beverly says, having a person answering the phone and inputting a return doesn't make a lot of sense. I think they should open up the telephone lines more. I've never heard any individual not complain about being on a telephone call with the IRS. I don't understand why they can't invest more money. This is a source of revenue for the government. This is their source of revenue. Why not invest in it?
So I think this year is definitely it's going to be interesting, in terms of the notices that are coming out. IRS really should focus their efforts on what is the most pressing issue. And really the most pressing issue is processing the returns, getting people their refunds. It's a lot of people. And, I run the low income taxpayer clinic at the University of Maryland. And these are people that they're living paycheck. I mean, a lot of us live paycheck to paycheck, right? But a person who is a low income taxpayer, they definitely are impacted by the fact that, they're not getting their refunds. I had a client call me and, they were in distress. And this was early on in the pandemic. And ordinarily you would be able to get Taz on the line and try to facilitate a more expeditious refund. But that definitely didn't happen because Taz is inundated too, There's such a backlog with Taz also. And to even have, Taz give you a call back, I call the office, my local taxpayer advocate office, and the message on the phone was like, hey, we have a huge backlog. Expect a call back within 30 days. What? 30 days? And the moratorium on foreclosures and evictions was lifted in August, at least here in Maryland. It was lifted back in August of 2021. people still haven't gotten their refund. And that's money that they could use, particularly if they qualify for the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit, that they could use in order to be able to live, right? To live another day in their apartment or another day in their house. So this is more than just a financial, I haven't gotten my tax return. It's also a livelihood, a health issue, right? Because if you are not able to pay your rent, guess what? You're stressed out. All that stuff impacts your health. You're trying to figure out where you're going to live, how you're going to feed your kids. And so I would like to see IRS put their efforts and resources toward processing the returns as opposed to collection or even audits. They really should be taking all their manpower and trying to figure out how they're going to process these returns.
So let's move to some of the big tax law changes that have affected individuals. This past year, following the enactment of the American Rescue Plan Act, the IRS distributed additional economic impact payments and launched the monthly payments of the advanced child tax credit. How will the changes affect return preparation this season?
I do tax returns too. And 3 years ago, I didn't have any gray hair. The last 3 years, dealing with this pandemic, do you know how much gray hair I have gotten? Just dealing with the frustration of everything that's happening in this pandemic, IRS. And then now I can only just imagine how challenging, this season is going to be, because you're going to have taxpayers that come in, they got the advanced child tax credit, right? Or they got the third stimulus check. They're going to walk in, they're not going to have their paperwork. They're not going to remember what they got, even though IRS sends the letters in. I'm assuming they probably have already gotten here by now. The letter is 6149 for the advanced child tax credit. And then I think it's a 6475 for the third stimulus check. Many people aren't going to remember what they got, and they're not going to have that letter. We're doing a lot to try to educate people that they have to bring that letter in, but I know a lot of people aren't going to have it. And then once we file the return, they may be thinking they're going to get a certain refund back. And then when they don't get that refund back, then now we're dealing with a flurry of calls from taxpayers. Why is my refund short? Then we got to stop and investigate why the refund is short, if we can, or we say, hey, send us a copy of the notice when you get the notice. And then the notice is not even really clear. It just says this is a math error. Your return, your stimulus check wasn't calculated. Your recovery rebate credit was not calculated correctly. So it makes it look like we did something wrong as a taxpayer. Like we didn't do the return correctly. And that's not true. It's that, whatever you said that you got as the recovery rebate credit didn't match what IRS has in their system that they gave to you, right? So this is another thing that kind of adds to the frustration, because now, your client is like, well, you didn't prepare accurate return. This is what I said I was supposed to get. And they rely on that. Like when the return, once they approve that return and it says they're going to get a refund of $3,600, and then the refund comes back $2,400. Well, guess what? That's $1,200 that they had accounted for and allocated to cover some other expense, right?
Or may have spent already.
Oh yeah, or may have spent it already. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I know is going to be a problem. I already foresee it. Is people that got these advanced child tax credits payments. Guess what? A lot of people just thought it was free money. Particularly, the confusion around stimulus checks. They're just like, oh, I got my stimulus check. I had people call me, oh, I got another stimulus check. And I'm like, when they go and file their tax return in 2022, and it has to be reconciled back to the 2021 tax return, and their refund is shorter than what they normally get in prior years, they're going to feel like they were taken advantage of, like they were duped by the government, because they spent that money when they were getting it every month, not knowing that all that stuff had to be claimed on the tax return the next filing season. So it's funny because I said I was fasting from wine this year, but I may have to pick a glass of wine up once or twice during this tax season.
Beverly brings up a lot of solid points, but I think if you think about what's going to be a big challenge this tax season, you have to go back to the first topic that we talked about, which is the delay in filing. What happens if some of these people, which is definitely going to happen, have filed and their returns haven't been processed, and they have an overpayment on their original return, or they have, credit elect carry forwards, or they have some passive loss carry forwards, or they have a lot of different things that completely tax returns roll from one year to the next. And you could be challenged by not even being able to, you file a return, they may get the 21 return before they've processed their 2020 return. And this is going to create even more notices, more confusion. So I would really like to know, as a preparer, the government would say today, we're going to extend the deadline now, and let's not wait. And part of us extending the deadline is maybe only until February 15th, we're going to accept 2020 returns, or just somehow you can only file your 2021 if you didn't, unless you've already filed 2020, or we have 2020 on file. I think that's something that they really need to think about, because as a preparer, I think about these things and I'm going to be like, we have a client right now who has his 2019 return, who can't get a credit elect carry forward. It's a lot of money. And he has identity theft he has fraud on his account. And to get that removed, you have to physically get the taxpayer on the phone, and they have to identify themselves. These are difficult things to do. First, getting the IRS on the phone. Second, finding a time when the client's going to get on the phone with you. I find it overwhelming. And we're trying to deal with right now, and it won't happen for another 5 days, where we've held people's returns to not manually file for the 21-day whole 3-week period for maintenance. And now we're going to start filing all these 2020 returns to try to have them, when they file their 2021 return, that it's recognized. So, you just have to think about that for a second and say, wow, that's a lot. It's a lot that this is going on and nobody's paying attention to this. And it's not even a discussed item. This is the government's money. It's the most important thing we need. It's going to be completely overwhelming. No one's thinking about this. Like, he's got to carry forward. Did he get his refund from last year? Did he get his refund from last year? Are we going to get our refund this year? It's a lot.
Support for this podcast is provided by the University of California Irvine School of Law Graduate Tax Program. Are you an employer looking to interview some of the best tax talent at the top law schools in the country? If so, then you'll want to check out the Tax Attorney Recruiting Event, or TARE, the largest event of its kind. The event is being held virtually on Thursday, February 24th, 2022, and brings together more than 150 graduate students from the LLM in taxation programs at Boston University School of Law, the University of Florida Levin College of Law, Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, and University of California Irvine School of Law. Participating employers will have the opportunity to pre-screen applications and select candidates with whom they wish to interview. Employers may participate by interviewing students virtually during TARE, or by collecting resumes from participating students. Don't miss out on this unique opportunity. Go to the-tare.com and click on the employer registration link. That's the-tare.com.
So much like individual taxpayers, businesses have also seen new developments in the tax law, and they have to contend with those. What are the major issues you see in the filing season ahead for business taxpayers that you work with?
I think business taxpayers, everybody's still forgetting about their forgiveness of their PPP loan. I think that's an issue a lot of people are ignoring, or they haven't really, we try to bring it to their attention. A lot of people are still waiting for their second EIDL loan if they're available. It seems like that's gone radio silent at the government's end. But in terms of new tax developments, it's pretty similar to last year, except expanding for inflation, which is a big number. I think, again, the overwhelming thing with, if you had extended your return from October 15th, as businesses should have all been filed. So I don't think that's going to be a big issue. I just think any of the money that you've gotten from the government or received from the government, whether it be a local stimulus, a Federal stimulus, is it taxable or is it not taxable, is a big issue. Like the restaurant revitalization program is not taxable. And a lot of clients have received that money in New York City. And processing all of those nuances and changes for a preparer and a firm is a lot. It's a lot. And getting everybody up to speed, and who's working remotely, who's working in the office. You try to accommodate all of the staff to give them what works best for everybody and everyone's anxiety and everyone's fears and strengths. And it's difficult because this is a business that's very connected. You're connected to the staff, you're connected to the clients. So it's very hard to delegate that and not have them connected with you at some level, either in the firm or on a virtual meeting. But I think the same thing with businesses, the same thing with individuals. It's going to take a lot. And I would like the government to recognize now if they're going to extend the deadline and not say, oh, I'm just giving people an out. And that's the government's mentality, that if they think that if they extend the deadline, everybody will extend. But maybe that makes sense this year to give everybody a chance to catch up, including the IRS, and letting us know ahead of time so Beverly doesn't have to drink too much wine. Or I do. I gave that up 10 years ago, but that's fine. I totally understand. Sleep is also something we could use a lot more of. But it is a stressful time for everybody. And I don't think it's fair to have all of us get grays, or all of us need some type of relief to put this amount of pressure on people for a profession for a very short period of time.
A lot of what, Paul says is definitely, I agree with, and I would say the exact same thing. I think the same issues that plague the individual processing also are plaguing the business community also, right? We filed applications for S Corp conversions and C Corp conversions and have not gotten any response from IRS. If we've gotten a response, it's been a year, 2 years later. And so clients are really in this kind of holding pattern because they don't know whether or not they are going to be approved for an S Corp or C Corp, or if they should be filing as an LLC. So that's one issue. The other issue and I don't do a lot of work in this area, but definitely the employee retention credit, that was new under the CARES Act. And I know people are still trying to understand and see if it applies to them. And the employee retention credit actually has been changed 3 or 4 times, right, under the various laws. So, people are trying to figure out whether or not it applies to them. And then, as Paul says, you got the PPP, you got the EIDL, you got grants, whether it's state and local. It may be taxable at the federal level, but not the state level, or taxable or non-taxable at the federal level, taxable at the state level. So it's definitely a lot. And in order this is what I tell people, who a lot of times they will just hire somebody just to do their return. It could be their uncle, aunt, cousin, or somebody like that. I don't think now is the time to just just get somebody to do your return. You really need to go to a professional who has been keeping abreast of the tax laws and can help you navigate today's tax system, because I've been doing this for 15 years, and never in my life, my young life, have I experienced just so much, I don't want to say chaos, but it's definitely a different environment when you are really serving taxpayers and trying to help them comply with tax laws.
Right. And the fact that this is a profession that's one of the least desirable professions to enter, it's not a glorified profession, that even puts more of a strain. Less staffing available, more work. The government has thrust so much compliance on preparers. It's challenging to meet all of their requests at every level. Every month there's something new they're asking for. They just sent out this new law where Zelle and PayPal and all these people are now going to start reporting $600 payments. Well, if you're already charging it on a credit card and it's already included in your 1099, well, then you don't have to issue a 1099. Not everybody knows that. These are the little nuances, but there are many larger nuances that the government wouldn't say the system's broken. I just think that everything could be improved. And I don't know why it's not being improved. Look, when Bloomberg became mayor here and he put 311 in, it was like, why doesn't the IRS have a 311? We need help. But somebody who answers the phone, you know what I mean? Someone who can actually help the individuals and give them a peace of mind when they need it.
So let's try to end on a high note. What aspect of the filing season do you think or hope will go particularly smoothly this year?
I'm always hopeful. Let me just say this, okay? I'm always hopeful. And I do want to end on a good note. I do want to say, I really appreciate the hard work that, the IRS employees actually provide. I'm on the phone. I just got off the phone earlier today in an appeals hearing with, on one of my clients. And, it was actually pretty cordial. We got a chance to talk, but the appeals officer was in good spirits. And when I say that is because a lot of times we're bashing IRS. And I know they're there working hard. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate them really trying. I just think that they don't have the capacity to do everything that they're tasked with doing. Like the advanced child tax credits, I know by statute they had to get the payments out beginning July 15th, but at the end of Congress really should have held off on that, in my opinion, to allow IRS to focus on processing the returns, right? But no, you said IRS, you got to process the returns. IRS, you got to go back and refund people that overpaid unemployment or it was taxed on the unemployment because the law didn't pass for the exclusion until after IRS's systems were up and returns were, being filed. So they had to go back and issue those refunds. They also had to manually look at the earned income tax credit the prior year to make sure that people qualify for the earned income tax credit. Then they had to issue recovery rebate credits. They also had to do the advanced child tax credit payment. So it was just way too much. And I do appreciate, every IRS employee, their work. Like I said, I've been doing this 15 years. I'm friends with some people in the IRS to the extent you can be friends with people. And, I appreciate it. So on a positive note, I will say, let's see, what can I say positive about this tax season? I think that we all are going to work together and try to deliver the best service, whether we are practitioners on this side, whether or not it's an IRS employee, whether or not it's TAS. And the other thing, I think the most important thing when you're dealing with anybody is just making sure that, in this COVID era, that everyone, stays healthy and that we also continue to give each other grace.
I think the positive thing about tax season is everybody in the firm always comes together. You pick up the people who are struggling, you ride with the people who are doing really well. And my experience in speaking about the IRS is I have always felt that the person, the individual, the auditor, the representative on the phone, whoever you're dealing with is a human being. And they've always done what I consider to be their job or an appropriate job. I'm not saying anybody can't have a bad day, anyone can't be off. What we can all work with is it should start at the top and say, we know it's going to be tough. But let's just do the best we can and try to help everybody. And my expectations for anyone I get on the phone is, can you help me? Because that's all I'm asking for. Because all we're trying to do is help clients and provide a service. And they're providing a service to us. And they shouldn't just look at it as that I have a job and I'm getting paid 9 to 5. They should take pride in the job that they do. And for the most part, the people I've gotten on the phone, I could say that I've gotten that feeling. I think in America where everyone is concerned about themselves or worried about themselves, I think it's a team. We're all a team and we need to come together to help each other. And that's what I would like. And that's what I'm hoping for every day. And I stay eternally optimistic. And that's the vibe that I run through my firm.
Well, thank you so much, Beverly and Paul, for joining the podcast today.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having us.
And And now, coming attractions. Each week we highlight new and interesting commentary in our magazines. Joining me now is Acquisitions and Engagement Editor-in-Chief Paige Jones. Paige, what will you have for us?
Thanks, Dave. In Tax Notes Federal, Darcy Costello analyzes academic literature and suggests how the IRS could improve tax compliance without additional funding. Marty Sullivan evaluates recent data indicating a growing trend of large U.S. tech multinationals shifting intangible assets into the United States. In Tax Notes State, Greg Featherman explores various tax issues related to the use of cross-border partnerships. Steve Volodicek identifies some state and local tax consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic that businesses and workers should consider. In Tax Notes International, Nana Amasarfo reviews the new digital nomad visa trend and notes that it presents several tax questions. Peter Hahn and Hafiz Chowdhury consider how tax treaties, trade agreements, and other cross-border arrangements may be used to improve trade, tax policy, administration, and dispute resolution. In Featured Analysis, Marie Sapiri examines the proposal to repeal or raise the SALT deduction and the efforts to expand the child tax credit in terms of contrast. And finally, on the opinions page, Robert Goulder writes that Ireland, or any other country thinking about territorial tax reforms, should kick the tires before they commit to fundamental change.
That's it for this week. You can follow me online at TaxStew, that's S-T-E-W, and be sure to follow at Tax Notes for all things tax. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions for a future episode, you can email us at podcast@taxanalyst.org. And as always, if you like what we're doing here, please leave a rating or review wherever you download this podcast. We'll be back next week with another episode of Tax Notes Talk.
Tax Notes Talk is a production of Tax Notes. You can learn more about us by visiting www.taxnotes.com/podcast. When major media wants the straight story, they turn to Tax Notes. Thank you for listening, and join us again for another edition of Tax Notes Talk.
Want to see more like this? Subscribe for more tax videos. Special thanks to our executive producers Jasper Smith and Paige Jones, as well as showrunner and audio engineer Jordan Parrish.